Hello, my name is Fernand Bautista, and today I will be arguing a policy change for transgender rights. Kaya spent a decade navigating life as an out and transitioning trans woman. She recounts her struggles in an interview from the Journal of Life Care Planning. She spoke of the long and expensive process of changing legal documents to fit her identity. She spoke of being ostracized and abandoned by her family, religious practice, and job. She has dealt with healthcare providers that have never received any training regarding trans people and providers who refuse to work with her at all. She ends the interview with the statement, "No, I don't feel as if I have the same legal rights as anyone." Transgender Americans are a minority group that requires proper consideration in the lawmaking system. Lawmakers have their sights set on the passing of policy that undermines the rights of trans citizens. The ACLU in 2020 documented a record number of anti-trans bills making their way through state legislatures. 23 states have passed bills that are anti-trans. This includes bills that limit trans people's access to healthcare, excludes transgender youth from sports, allows religiously motivated discrimination against trans people, and more. American legislation should be changed to defend the basic rights of transgender people. High rates of trans suicide and violence against trans people are due to social stigmatization and unawareness, which are supported by legislation that undermines trans rights. Abolishing anti-trans bills and enacting bills that protect the rights of trans people would allow for more equal opportunity for this often mistreated group. Transgender Americans are suffering at a higher rate than many other citizens. The suffering of transgender Americans is due to the pressures placed upon them due to their stigmatized minority status. Opponents of transgender rights will assert that trans suffrage is due to the mental instability of trans people. Opposed to this is a theory from the Journal of Abnormal Psychology on the high trans suicide rate called the interpersonality theory. This theory states that the social isolation that many trans people face and trans people's lack of protection from discrimination and negative behaviors are the main factors in the high numbers. When looking at the high trans suicide rates, the rampant poor treatment of trans people is as much a factor as any medical issues a trans person may have. After all, trans Americans have much to fear. According to the Washington Blade in 2019, the FBI's 2018 hate crime statistics report shows that the number of anti-transgender hate crimes increased by 41% from the previous year. In 2020, Vice stated that there was an increase of 49 to 70 anti-LGBTQ hate groups in the U.S. The anxieties of transgender Americans and the discrimination and stigma against them all have roots in American legislation. Anti-trans bills and lack of positive consideration of trans people in the lawmaking system greatly contributes to trans suffrage. According to the National Center for Trans Equality, on President Trump's inauguration day, the administration scrubbed all mentions of LGBTQ people from the websites of the White House, Department of State, and Department of Labor. This would mark a trend in the treatment of LGBTQ people under the Trump administration. The Trump administration has done much to make trans Americans less visible, remove systems made to help trans people, and add systems that are anti-trans. Public delegitimization and attempts to undermine trans rights by the highest echelons of the American government are probable causes for trans suffrage and the increase in anti-LGBTQ hate groups. According to the ACLU, trans people lack rights or have rights that are in danger of being minimized in healthcare, schools, sports, the military, and in workplaces. The Trump administration has worked to gut non-discrimination protections in healthcare rights law. The administration also wants to give healthcare providers a license to discriminate based on their religion. Secretary of Education Betty DeVoy has repealed components of Title IX that allow transgender students to use restrooms consistent with their gender identity, and has also announced that the Department of Education will no longer investigate any complaints filed by transgender students who have been banned from restrooms that match their gender identity. Many schools and states across the country have marginalized trans athletes by banning them from participating in sports. The ban on trans people in the military went into effect in 2019. In 2019, the Department of Labor proposed a rule that would allow government contracted employers to discriminate against trans employees. With the lack of trans rights and the rights that they currently hold being under fire, the cause of the trans suicide epidemic is no mystery. If suffering is to stop, we must get involved. To aid trans people, we must get involved in having senators vote yes on the Equality Act and spread awareness to people in our lives. According to the ACLU in 2019, the Equality Act would explicitly outlaw discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, extending protections in employment, housing, and access to public spaces and services. Go to action.aclu.org/sendmessage/pass Equality Act and enter your information to send a message to your senators to vote yes on the Equality Act. Your help to outlaw these forms of discrimination would ensure rights for all Americans and aid all LGBTQ people. At the core of trans suffrage is social stigmatization and discrimination. By spreading awareness of the trans experience and the issues that trans people face, we can help to alleviate some of the pressure that trans people endure. Tell friends and family of some of the things you heard today to spread the word of the injustice that trans people face. Encourage others to send a message to your senators to pass the Equality Act. If anyone you know is unaware of what trans people are, do not be afraid to educate them. By spreading awareness of trans people and their struggles, we can work to make an environment that considers and accepts all people. The suffering and discrimination that trans people face must be stopped. A big factor in their struggles is the lack of protection from legislation and the increasing number of bills that are anti-trans. To stop this disproportionate suffering, we must work to encourage our senators to pass the Equality Act and spread awareness of trans people and their struggles to people in our lives. American legislation should be changed to defend the basic rights of trans people. If we fail to encourage this change, the suffering of this group of people may never improve. If we help to make a change, trans people will have equal opportunity to lead happy and fulfilling lives, as all people should. Please, contact your senators and spread awareness. The law should never be used to aid discrimination. It should protect everyone's basic rights, regardless of who anyone is. Thank you.